Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome to another episode of Career Coach Office Hours. Tuesdays at 9:15, Fridays at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. In both cases, I take some time to answer some questions I've received during the week about job search, hiring better, management, leadership, resolving workplace issues. Because for many of you, it's harder than it really needs to be. And as a result, I want to kind of resolve some of your questions, make it easier for you. And I'll just simply say, if you have a question for me, you can put it into chat and I'll be able to deal with it today. And it looks like, again, I don't have LinkedIn availability on chat, which is why I'm switching services in the middle of the month. I've already identified another one. I'm not happy with Restream.io. Many people have told me wonderful things about it. And frankly, that hasn't been my experience. So I'll just simply say, on to the next service, and let's see that they're better, okay? In the meantime, if you have a question for me, put it into chat so that this way I can answer it with today's show, okay? I'll also mention that the week of Thanksgiving, I won't be doing the Friday show. We'll be visiting family in the New York area. Our son lives there. My wife's parents, my wife's mom and her family live there. And we're going to go up to New York for Thanksgiving. So that show won't be on, but I'll simply say I'm here to help. If you have a question for me, for today, put it into chat. In the future, you can send it in advance, as other people did, and email it to me at thebiggamehunter@gmail.com. In the subject line, put the phrase office hours. This way I know what it's about, and I can respond to your question there. So let's go to the questions I have, and bear with me one second. There we go. Should job hunters apply for jobs they don't want just for the interview experience? I know companies won't like this answer, but I think you should. But I want you to go into it with a different mindset than this one. I want you to go into it with the mindset that this is decent. Maybe it's better than what I think it is. Minimally, it's practice for me, but I want you to go in with an open mind that this might be a situation you'd be interested in. And thus, you're preparing questions that make sense for you to really evaluate and assess and confirm for yourself that this isn't right for you. Because I know when I worked in search, there were many people who would go on interviews and they would say to me, I really wasn't sold on this job, but it's actually a lot better than I thought it would be. And they wound up going to work at these organizations and lasting for many years. So again, practice will help. You don't have to practice there. In the show notes on YouTube, and you'll find that I have a link to a service where for $99 you have a ton of practice interviews to work with, and I'll evaluate your answers. So it's a video service where you record your answers and I evaluate them afterwards. So there'll be a link in the show notes on YouTube and on my website when it goes live tomorrow on the website, where you can wind up doing mock interviews there. And I'll also mention, if you want to get a great interview framework, there's a course available on my website, which is thebiggamehunter.us. And the course is called The Ultimate Job Interview Framework. It'll teach you how to interview far better than anyone else does, so that this way you stand out in a good way. Now, it's not going to help you be more competent than you are. It's going to reflect your expertise and allow you to package it in a way that the audience gets it. So you connect the dots for them on the interview with what your background is versus what they need. So that's the answer to question number one. What should be included in a job posting, and how do you write and create a posting? Now, a lot of employers, a lot of hiring managers make a mistake with their job post, and they go for easy. Easy translates into they recycle something that's been previously approved. I understand why you do it. It's just easier. You don't have a lot of time. You're hustling and you hire people based upon this job description. But here's where the disconnect is. The disconnect starts off with you're seeing more people than you need to, or reviewing more resumes and applications than you need to, because the job description no longer reflects what the role is. It emphasizes certain things that may be less important to you than others. So do a rewrite of an existing job description that you have to accurately reflect what it is that you're looking for and what someone will be doing in this job, so that in this way you're seeing a tighter scope of resume than you might be doing otherwise. You can always start from scratch, but again, you don't have a lot of time for that. Think about the qualities of the person who's been your most successful hire. What is it about them made them qualified? What are the personal attributes that you saw at the time that they interviewed that allowed them to stand out in a good way from the people who stood out in the bad way? So I'll simply say, start with an existing rec and revise it. An existing rec that you revise based upon the trials and errors that you've had with previous hires. And if you've never hired someone before, take the existing rec and think about what it is you really want. And then emphasize those points in the job description so that you're seeing people who are a tighter fit for the role. What is the best way to stand out from the crowd when applying for a job? I love this question because it's really easy. The real answer, well, one part is, of course, you have a background that fits what it is that they're looking for. Duh. So many people don't, and they spam their resume. But the real answer to this is someone's provided them with an introduction to you and advocated for you and basically said, this woman, this guy can do this job. And this is what I know about them. This is what they've done previously. And thus, this is a big thing that I encourage people to do. Figure out how to cut the line. A story that I tell from when my wife and I adopted our son, and we had to travel from Almaty, Kazakhstan to Moscow. And in Moscow, in customs, there was a huge line. It's like, it was a couple hundred people online, and we had a soon-to-be 1-year-old that we were carrying in. But we had been told that in Russia, a family with very young children can walk to the front of any line and be served, and everyone accepts that. It was true. We were able to cut this line of a couple of hundred people and get to the very front with people waving us to the front of the line because they saw the baby and the baby Bjorn that my wife was wearing at that time. Cut the line. Don't just simply apply. Find out ways to cut the line. And if you want to use a different metaphor, there's the front door of the nightclub, there's the back door where people sneak in, and then there's the side door. What's the side door? What's the back door? Who can provide you with those introductions? Is overtime cheaper than hiring? Many times it is, because with hiring, you're dealing with someone who's starting fresh. They have to be trained. A firm and a manager are going to interview a lot of people. In other words, kiss a lot of frogs before they get to the princess, or the prince, I should say. And the result winds up being there's a huge time suck that is a cost that a manager has. In addition, since this person is starting at square zero on payroll, a firm is matching Social Security. This is a U.S. answer, by the way. They have to pay matching Social Security until the person hits the threshold. I don't remember what the number is now. And thus, that's an additional expense. There's the training cost when the person comes on board versus just pay for overtime from an existing employee who you know what their capabilities are and you know that they'll do a good job for you. So often it is. And sometimes you just have to hire another person because you know your staff is stretched. So rather than pay overtime and kill your people and have them work 90 hours a week without much in the way of a personal life, it becomes better to hire someone from the outside so that in this way, your staff isn't killed with work that's going to make them want to leave, which is, again, it's a circular firing squad. They're basically killing themselves for you, and you're going to wind up losing them. If you don't care about that, that's fine. But that's why sometimes, many times, paying overtime is cheaper than hiring someone new. What is something that businesses look for in a resume they wouldn't necessarily reveal in a job ad? Now, bias shows up. Let's not kid ourselves. We all know that bias exists. And they're not going to say, we want to hire a woman for this job. We want to hire a person of color for this job. But the behavior may say, and I have to say, we want to hire a white male for this job because biases exist in all sorts of directions. So they're not going to say that in an ad. They're not going to necessarily say that they want to hire someone with the legal right to work in the US, that they're not going to need to sponsor a person in order to hire them. These are things that are pretty common that a firm will look for as part of their evaluation criteria. They may not mention that they don't want to relocate someone. They assume that you know they want someone local unless they specify that relocation is available. Things like these, they're not going to necessarily lay out in the ad, but it is a part of their evaluation process. Why is it effective to gather additional information by interviewing other company employees? There's two ways I can answer this because I'm not sure if you're talking about your company employees or another company's employees, like from a competitor. From a competitor, you learn how that firm does things, which might be better than what you do, what your firm does. And thus, you're in a situation where you're learning things from this person that benefits you in your department. So that's the issue with hiring someone from a competitor. When you're talking to people internal to your organization, you're getting like a 360 of what the people in your department are doing well, what they could be doing better, and use this information to improve the job requirement and your evaluation criteria. For example, if your user population tells you that they want people who don't have accents because they're concerned about the ability to understand, well, that's feedback for you from a user community. If they talk with you about, I don't know, I'm just going to pick something in random. Someone who is a more serious-minded person than the playful one that they're interacting with now, again, that becomes part of your evaluation process. So I'm not sure whether you were talking about hiring someone from a competitor or learning information from an internal user within your organization. Whichever it is, I hope that answered your question. If not, message me and I'll take another cut at it. Is there such a thing as a catch-all cover letter? Yes, and it's a bad thing to do because not all jobs are the same, right? So why would you give people the same cover letter? It's like the broken watch that's right twice a day. You're going to hit with some companies in some interviews, but most you won't. As a result, what happens is, the cover letter isn't serving you in any way. If you're going to use a cover letter, then make the fit obvious in the cover letter by doing this. I'm forwarding my resume to you. I'm uploading my resume to your system for the position of fill in the blank. This is how my background and experience fits the role. Flush left. Yeah, I did that right. Flush left, you put, let's say, one of the items of experience sought. Flush right, how long and how recently you've performed that function. Flush left, the requirement. Flush right, how long and how recently. So they see it right away and they become interested. Skip things that you don't have experience with that are in the requirements, but make it obvious for them how your background fits the role. And that's the best way to use the cover letter. And then from there, the third paragraph is, I look forward to hearing from you about next steps. If I haven't heard from you in a day or two, I'll follow up with a quick call or email. That's why you can't use a generic cover letter, because it's not customized for this employer and their need. All you're doing is talking about yourself without connecting the dots for them as to how your background fits the role. Okay. 3 more questions. Oh, this one was a fun one. How do you trust your gut when it comes to a job offer? So trust your gut is an emotional response to a situation. You know inside that this is good for you or it's not good for you. And let's deal with the not good for you scenario first. In the not good for you scenario, you have an offer, it's a job, there's a nagging doubt about it. You've spoken with the hiring manager again. You've asked a lot of questions. You're not satisfied with the answer. As I like to joke, what happens is you smell BS, and thus it's not right for you to go to work at this firm. So that's that version of trusting your gut. Instinctively, you know it's wrong. There's nothing there, or there's not enough there to make you want to join. You've asked questions to clarify issues for you, and still you're not satisfied. On the other side of this, when you're in a situation where it's trust your gut positive, and maybe the money's a little off, you try and renegotiate the salary, the comp, whatever it is, try and renegotiate so that in this way, what you're able to do is solve that issue and feel great about joining. Usually you can get an offer increased by a few dollars. We're not talking about $25,000 unless you're at a very senior level. We're talking about a few $1,000s. And that may be enough for them to demonstrate to you that your organization is right for their organization is right for you and that you should join because they went the extra mile to get you. So that's how you trust your gut. It's a feeling you get. And when you start to get paralysis through analysis, try and solve the analytical issues. Try and solve the internal doubts that exist by asking more questions. And again, if it's about money, you try and get them to move the money up. Another question for you. I'm not sure if I've answered this one before, but let's work on the assumption I haven't. Why do employers avoid hiring job seekers who've been out of work for a while? Because I'm going to say this about recruiters and employers because employers train recruiters. We've been trained, and I was a recruiter for what felt like 100 years. It was more like 40. In fact, recruiters have been trained to believe, what's wrong with this person? Why were they out of work so long? What's wrong with them? Because that's the way their clients think. And since third-party recruiters want to make money and the employer is paying them, they act on their behalf. And as long as what they do is legal and doesn't involve discrimination, They can say to themselves, okay, this person's been out for 2 years. They've lost a lot. They've forgotten a lot. No one's going to pay me for this person. It's 2 years they've been out of work. On the corporate side, they wonder what's wrong with you that you could afford to be out of work for 2 years. Why weren't you trying to get a job? And as such, they smell that version of BS. So recognize employers, recruiters have been lied to previously. And I know you believe recruiters lied to you too. I'm not going to get into that argument. I'm just going to say job applicants lie, employers lie, recruiters lie. When they're not talking to you, it's because they wonder what's wrong. And as such, they may not explore it because they know you know how to lie around this. And they're going to want to get a sense of your sincerity with your answers. So that's why they're reluctant to hire people who've been out of work for a while. Last question for today. Have you ever hired someone on the spot? Yes, it was a mistake. See, one thing I've learned over the course of years is like hiring is like dating. You wouldn't get married to someone on the basis of one date, would you? Maybe a 2-hour date, maybe a 4-hour date. It may be a date that lasts the entire weekend, but you probably wouldn't get married to them right away, would you? As a result, when someone hires someone on the basis of one interview, usually it winds up being a problem because that person was able to put on good performance because job applicants, shall we say, exaggerate their capabilities, embellish the truth, lie, and do a variety of other things to create a great impression. Employers do the same thing, but we're here talking about being hired on the spot. It doesn't serve the employer unless it's a consulting organization that needs to deliver someone the next day, the next week, something along those lines. But usually firms want to have a couple of dates before they propose marriage, just like you would. So yes, it happens on occasion, far less so than it did in the olden days, but it still happens. And the reason why it doesn't happen with regularity is there's always something negative that comes out of doing that. So I'm Jeff Altman. Hope you found this helpful. There's a lot more at thebiggamehunter.us, at JobSearchTV.com, on YouTube, on my podcast, No BS Job Search Advice Radio. All these venues are designed to give you information so that you don't have to make dumb mistakes that prove costly. Also going to mention to you, if you're interested in my coaching you can schedule time for a free discovery call or schedule time for coaching. I'd love to help you. And you can do that at thebiggamehunter.us. At the site, you can also order my courses. I also have a number of books available through Amazon that you can order too. The two that I particularly recommend are, ready for these? The Ultimate Job Interview Framework and The Right Answers to Tough Interview Questions. They complement one another very well and will help you find work more quickly. Lastly, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/The Big Game Hunter. Have a terrific day, and most importantly, be great. Take care.